Hey, everybody. Today for you, podcast number 92. Today's podcast is titled, What We See Tells Us Who You Are. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. We are Dr. Pete and Sandy Lombardi, and this is the Limitless Life Network podcast where we flesh out the limitations that are preventing you from reaching your goals and living the life that you are called to lead. So, Sandy, here we are again.
Yes, number 93.
92.
92.
In
coming up on 100.
Yeah, we're approaching it. Yeah, we were in the studio. It's a little warm today. We didn't get the climate control under control. So if you see us perspiring on YouTube, then you'd understand why. It's a little warm up here today. So yeah, the studio is looking pretty good. We're thinking of some changes, so that's in the future. But we always want to start the podcast off by
thanking all of you for listening.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to what we have to say and what we care to share. And thank you also for sharing yourself with other people. Like, follow, share, subscribe, and all that jazz. I guess. Okay, good. On with the show. So what we see tells us who we are. When I first pulled that title out, you're like, I don't get it. And that's usually how the titles work. They are a little bit ambiguous, but it's you'll see as we go through the content. So I guess the backstory for today is just a lot of good conversations that we've had lately with some people. Yes. Mm-hmm. As you just came back from a nice conversation with somebody you were telling me about, and Sandy and I are talking periodically throughout our day, as any married couple will do. And we also have other friends that we speak with, and we break down some good stuff. So I met with my trainer Josh this morning, Josh Lewis, who's been on the podcast a couple times, which I'd like to get him back again because he and I really share a lot of common beliefs in the way we look at the world. So but anyway, the first point that we wanted to talk about, what is the point number one? Do you remember?
Acting as if you believe.
Yeah. So this actually I borrowed a bit. I've been borrowing a lot lately from Jordan Peterson, but Jordan Peterson said something that caught my attention, and I think I'd even may have caught Josh's attention. I'm not sure if this was the one thing, but we were talking about him today as well. But he's always asked, because he speaks about the Bible a lot, and he speaks about wrestling with God. That's his tour that he's doing. But he's often asked, do you believe in God? And he says, this is, quote, I don't believe in God. I act as if I believe in God. And this is really kind of the premise for a lot of what we're going to talk about today is I act. Not an act as in a performance, but our actions as in our behavior, how we carry ourselves, the things that we say, think, and do, our actions. And I know that living a life that is a life where you are trying to demonstrate your belief in something can be very challenging in our world today, because as human beings, we all have this need to be accepted and liked. And so being part of a tribe, being part of a community, oftentimes we will not let out our own beliefs because we don't want to be judged. We don't want to have to deal with defending our beliefs. So acting as if you believe in God requires you to step out and have faith that it's going to be okay if you act as if you believe in God. So, yeah, that's the premise of today's talk, really.
This is podcast. A little bit off topic, but you talked about a tribe, and I was chatting with a good friend the other day, and she was just telling me how she'd been struggling homeschooling, and it was because she hadn't yet found that tribe that built her up and supported her in who she really is, and I guess allowing her to act the way she really feels internally. And so I think that's super important. And she was saying, it was a really dark time, a time of such self-doubt and doubting what she was doing and her purpose, and it went way beyond homeschooling. And as we talked, she's like, it really became, I was trying to do it in my own strength, and I wasn't willing to surrender and accept God's help. And she said, when I finally came to that point of surrender is when doors opened and I found this tribe and connected, and what a shift it had been for their family in so many different ways. So acting it and finding your tribe, I think.
Yeah, and that's exactly what a lot of us do, is we find people that agree with us. And that's unfortunate today that we see this in the political realm where people are divided. Our country has been pretty divided lately. There's been a lot of, we're probably the two least likely people to be talking about politics. We're the least informed, but we do sense this divide, right? There's this, the right and left, like what happened to in between? What happened to that, right? So, and I think it's a disservice to our country in what we're seeing there. But people go into this tribe, and because it supports their beliefs, right or wrong, and then you don't ever really question it anymore. So it's not always healthy.
So it could be negative
to be in a sounding room, where you're just hearing the same, an echo, I think they call it an echo chamber, where you're just hearing the same thing over and over and over again. So it's always good to question and challenge, that stuff, and test it and test your beliefs, because if they don't hold water, it's okay to abandon a belief.
Sure.
And move on to something else that you find to be true. Really, it's a seeking of truth that I think really helps people to gain confidence and gain clarity in their life. So, So number 2, what's number 2?
Number 2 is, what are we modeling?
Yeah. So where did this come from?
You were on the phone with Nate this morning, and we were brainstorming a little bit with him. And
oh yeah.
And he said he had been in contact with a family through the practice, and was just, this came up, like, what are parents modeling for their children? What example are they setting in the way they live, the way they look at their health, the way they view money, all different. You can take it to all different aspects, but there were a couple that he was displayed, I guess, in his interactions with this family. And just a good question for all of us, like, what are we modeling either for your own children or for those you might be teaching or working with, in any area of influence?
Yeah. If you've ever raised children, or if you're raising children, then you probably know that there are times when your kids when they start talking, that they start repeating things that they hear you say. And sometimes you have to stop them because they're about to say something that you said that you probably shouldn't have said. Yeah. Because that only happens to me, right? No, I'm sure every parent has had that happen at one point in the rearing of their children, where their kids say the darndest things, but they actually came from you probably first. And that has happened to me, and it was an eye-opener that, wow, I really need to watch not only what I say, but how I behave and what I do, because they are watching all the time, and that happens. So
I know one thing you were very conscious of with our children was never telling them we couldn't afford something. It was looking at it differently, like we choose to not spend our money on this rather than,
Yeah, because I grew up always hearing that money doesn't grow on trees, and that we can't afford that. We don't have the money for that. And what it came down to was that that's a mentality of save, protect, and kind of always trying to protect, and it's a bit of a scarcity mindset. And what I've adopted instead of that is more of an abundance mindset, that if I don't have the resources at this time, that I can acquire it if I want it bad enough. That's it.
Right.
Because money is not the end all be all of anything, right? We put a lot of emphasis on it in our culture today. And that's kind of brings us to point number 2 or point number 3,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yep.
So
What is the measure of wealth?
what is the measure of wealth? And I wanted to talk about this because I caught a very small clip of David Goggins talking about how he doesn't have a car. And he was saying that, these material things are a bunch of bunk. They really are meaningless. He goes, if you want to show me a rich person, show me a rich person. A rich person to him was show me their kids. Show me their kids, because if you have raised your children with a mindset that they have to work hard, or the whatever mindset that you've instilled, what have you planted in your kids' head? Is it work hard, work smart? Is it be kind? Is it be loving? Is it to fear God? Is it what are you teaching your children? He said that's your legacy.
Mm-hmm.
All this material stuff is going to be gone.
Yeah.
But what you're really going to leave behind, the wealthiest people leave behind people that are used to society. So show me your children. Show me your children, and that's a true measure of wealth. And how do you measure wealth? Well, some people measure it in what's in your bank account. Some people measure it in your portfolio, like how many assets versus liability. Like that is just purely a physical measurement of monetary wealth. Wealth is bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
Wealth is way more encompassing than that.
As you're talking, I have this picture in my head of our pastors, John and Christy Camp, and their family, which is huge. They have 5 children. I don't even know
how many grandkids,
20 some odd grandchildren, and most all of them live local. They attend the church. They're involved. And I look at them and I have to be a little bit cautious that it's not like this jealous, envious. Like I am so in awe of the wealth that they have. Like to me, that's the ultimate wealth. Like just this incredible blessing of family and being surrounded by them. And, to me, that's extreme wealth.
And the beauty of it is that they want to be there.
Oh, right. It's just this
it's a
beautiful.
true love where everybody wants to be with everybody. And that's, to me, that is they may be the wealthiest people that I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not monetary wealth that we're talking
right.
about.
They work hard.
They're all productive. And there's so much love in that family, and it's going to carry on for generations. And that has impressed me. So, yeah. So that's, I guess, a different way to measure wealth. So,
right.
And that brings us to another point that we came up with today, and that is, what have you unknowingly forfeited to artificial intelligence? So this is kind of shifting gears totally to something you were talking about.
Yeah, it was a conversation I had with a girlfriend talking about parenting and the dangers with cell phones and internet access with our children. And one of their teenage daughters was had questions about relationships and teen stuff. And she was searching, on the internet, and they realized it quickly, thankfully. They're amazing parents and, checking tablets and things. But then they had a healthy conversation with their teenager, and she's like, I was really curious, but I didn't want to ask you. And so it made us both realize, as parents, we want to be the people that your children come to with those really important questions. But it's now that they can ask that on their phone and through a computer, where we didn't have that when we were growing up. So we were talking it's a different world. We have to constantly be on our guard against that, and not just, I assume, I guess, that they never dreamt that their child would think to ask those questions outside of them. So,
and this goes back to, point number 2, which is, what are you modeling? Because how many times have we as parents been in the same room with our child and we've been buried in our phone, and maybe they're ready to have a conversation with us, but we're too distracted to be on our phone because we're busy, right? Busy doing something that we think is so important. But, that makes me, it reminds me of a John Maxwell saying that he said, I read in one of his books, and he said, there's no such thing as quality time with your kids. Quantity time is where quality time happens. So in other words, you think you're going to compress time and spend some quality time with your children. And he said that's such a false thing, because quantity time is when your kid finally comes up with the courage, when you're out there, painting a fence for 6 hours with them straight, and they ask you questions after the third or fourth hour, or you're trimming the hedges or mowing the lawn, and in passing, your son asks you about girls for the first time. Like, the quality time happens in the midst of quantity time.
Yeah, that's true.
And we've gotten to this idea of soundbite relationships, and that happens because of the addiction to the electrical signals and these visual signals from these devices that we're so addicted to today.
Yeah.
So just be super aware of that. Just be very conscientious of it, and don't feel like, you're spending too much time with your kids. And just spend more time. You can never spend enough time, because they don't stay kids forever.
Right.
And we're experiencing that as well. So, yeah. And again, it's not a judgment. I hope people realize that these podcasts are literally us just telling you about all the problems that we experienced in our own life. It's totally not like, oh, you're doing this wrong. No, these are all the things that we've done and experienced. So yeah, it's not a judgment whatsoever. And that brings us to point number what?
Number 5.
Yes, this is point number 5. And if you listen to the podcast, we always do 5 points. So what's the last one?
The process is greater than the end.
Oh, this is all you.
Well, Pastor mentioned this Sunday, and I don't even remember quite the context of it, but I was like, oh, that's good. But to me, the process is greater than the end. So we're often we think we're working towards the end, whatever it is, a goal, accomplishment.
Some type of result.
Yeah. And we're focusing on that, but we can lose track that all of the things that happen on the way there are where the lessons are and where the joy can be, or the challenge, but yet that's where it's at, and I even think parenting, like, we're focused on the end. Maybe it's graduation, let's say, and we can miss out on all of the teaching moments or the highlights along the way if we're too focused on the end.
Yeah. We are very much an event-driven society, right? So we're not looking at the process as much as that, okay, yes, I'm working this kid toward, the championship of the baseball season. I'm helping this kid get to graduation for the year, then I'm trying to get him into college, and then I'm trying to get him graduated from that, and then on to getting married, and after the wedding. Like, these are all these events, but what's happening along the way are the trials and tribulations, the struggles, the lessons, the growth that takes place during the process. And I'm going to tell you right now, I heard this a long time ago from a Dr. Steve Hoffman. He said, you're always in process. We're always in process. You're always processing. Your body is a living organism that is constantly processing. So enjoy the process, embrace the process, and learn from the process.
And I think just realizing these 2.4 and 5 really correlate well, because it's the time and spending time in the process. Like, so with your kids, things come up and they're like, needed more time, right? Spent nurturing this. And so I think those two tie really well together, is take the time, be in the process, be in the day to day.
Right. Yeah. And it's like living in the moment. We hear that often, right? But it's just recognizing that every day is the process. And There's the lessons, there's the growth, there's the trials, there's the celebrations, the joy, the hurt, the sorrow. All of that is process. You've heard of the grieving process, right? What about the joy process, the celebration process? And that's life, and that's the richness of life. And when you have a family that wants to be with you through that whole process, you are wealthy. Wealthy beyond measure. And if they know the Lord and you do too, boy, you're really doing well in life. At least that's the way I see it.
Good.
Yeah. All right. That is all. That's a wrap for this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. Be sure to tune in each and every week so you can stay connected, be inspired, and keep moving toward your best life by stripping away your limitations. So we will see you next week.
Enjoy the sunshine.
Yes.